The way we understand the world is the framework for how we act in the world. As the 21st century unfolds, it is increasingly clear the major crises of our time cannot be understood in isolation. Environmental destruction and climate change. Inequality. Xenophobia, sexism, and racism. Political legitimacy. These problems are different expressions of a crisis of worldview, the story of how we understand ourselves, our place in the universe, and our relationships to each other and the earth. "500 years ago, a story took hold in England that we could separate ourselves from nature. This story saw nature like a great machine that could be mastered. This story set off the cultural and scientific revolutions of the 1600s. This story globalized through the Industrial Revolution and colonialism, and is at the heart of the wonders and the horrors of the modern era. Our social and economic institutions are built on this 500-year-old story. A new story is emerging through a wide array of cultural and technological expressions from every corner of the planet. From those on the cutting edge of science, from those confronting global crises, and from those who have been carrying different stories for the past 500 years. In this emerging story, instead of dominating nature, we learn from nature. And we creatively align our economics, politics, and cultures with the web of life. Rob Garrity and myself cross the continents, connecting with people and experiences that are at the edge of the new story. We engage these flourishing human communities whose social and technological innovations grow out of creative alignment with the web of life. We began with industrial symbiosis in the city of Kalundborg, Denmark. This first episode explores the future of industry, where we seek to learn from and optimize our relationships with other living systems in the web of life.
Industrial symbiosis might be a little bit academic and heavy for people to just consume, but the way that we explain it is really to say what is one company's waste or residual is another company's resource. What we're really trying to do here is finding an ecosystem between the companies where we could exploit all resources. So more or less we are mimicking nature as a system approach, looking at, for instance, in nature you don't have waste. You actually only have residuals that become part of another part of the ecosystem. Instead of looking at it as waste, we're actually looking at it as a potential resource. If not at your own company, then at a partner company in the local area. And one of the really good examples is the collaboration between the power station Dong Energy and the plasterboard company Gyproc. The power station contacted the manager at Gyproc and said, would you be interested to taking off this waste fraction that we have? Because as it is right now, I'll be transporting it to landfill and it's very costly for me and it's not good for the environment. And at the time, Gyproc was actually very interested in looking for new sources because it was getting very expensive to mine out natural gypsum in the southern parts of Europe and transporting it to Denmark for production. And suddenly, 200 meters down the road, they had a new source, a much cleaner source, so they could cut out mining costs, they could cut out transportation costs, and the pre-processing of the natural gypsum, and they would get a much cleaner, much cheaper source for their production.
Today, Kalundborg Symbiosis has more than 50 exchanges between companies of energy, materials, and water.
What we have learned from the Kalundborg case and also from other industrial symbiosis systems that grew organically or bottom up was really that it happened in areas where you have scarce resources. So there should be some sort of incentive for the companies to address this in collaboration.
Kalundborg Symbiosis is transforming the ideas and practices of industry that emerged in the last several hundred years. Industry based in resource extraction, consumption, and waste. Global ecological crisis shows us the limitations of this way of doing industry. At Kalundborg Symbiosis, industrial systems are being developed with the understanding that humans are part of the web of life. The experience at Kalundborg draws from knowledge of ecosystems, creating a circular economy of materials, energy, and water that runs increasingly on the power of the sun. In the second episode, we engage with the Senegalese eco-village movement. In Senegal, hundreds of villages are taking the best of West African village life and combining this with green technology and recuperation of their lands, creating one of the most effective grassroots development efforts on the continent.
Senegal is a Sahelian country where desertification is really a big issue here, and we've seen in the past years that we have less and less rainfall. We have also seen our forests being depleted completely. The eco-village philosophy and practice, gives me a holistic view of what I really would like to achieve, because it's integrated, it's grassroots based, it's the ideals of and values of our traditions combined with also new clean technologies. The land is completely dead. So we need every year more and more, chemical fertilizers, more and more pesticides. We're trying to develop some permaculture gardens. We're trying to develop some agroforestry. If you go to a place like Jara, erosion, more sandstorms, and more poverty, nothing for the cattle to eat, and less things for the people also to eat. At some point, the village decided to give up part of their land and turn it into a forest reserve. 10 years later, it is even more dense than this. It's become a real forest with bees, with lots of colorful birds, lots of animals like boars, and even the river has more fish, and they make also a lot of income out of the forest resources. If you go to Guédé Chantier, for example, the village where I was a mayor for the past 5 years, just the fact of bringing the water distribution system into some districts will free the girls from the business of spending half a day getting water for their families. And then as these girls are free from this chore, they can go to school and study. In some villages we try to bring in solar panels, have light at night, and then have also small fridges we can also use to store medicine or a little bit of food. Today, if you go to Bakumbel Eco Village in the center, because these young kids now have light, their school results have gone up. The kind of development we're looking for is really a development that is really based on our traditions, on our culture, on our personalities, and also we would like to be open up to the modern world at the same time.
West Africa bore the weight of the expansion of modernity. European colonization exploited cheap and slave labor while extracting resources for the growth of economies far away. This relationship continues in many ways today, with Europe, the US, and China. The Senegalese eco-village movement is creating new forms of social and economic development rooted in earth-based spiritualities, green technology, and working together to heal the land. We are now filming with a network of agroecological cooperatives of the Brazilian landless movement in the south of Brazil. These communities of displaced farmers struggled for access to land and then transitioned to ecological agriculture, or agroecology. Having gained access to land badly degraded by the dominant model of industrial agriculture, they began to creatively align with nature and bring their soil back to health instead of using costly and harmful petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides.
Uma das concepções da agroecologia é tu melhorar a fertilidade natural do solo.
Using agroecological methods, they see their farms as ecological systems.
Te dá de conta que o fato de tu obter o fruto, tu obter pêssego, o produto do pêssego, ele é consequência de espaço, né? Ele é consequência de ambiente.
Competing against subsidized agribusiness, they work cooperatively and are now the largest producers of organic rice in Latin America. These cooperatives provide low-cost, high-quality, sustainable food to schools, hospitals, and wider markets. Industrial agriculture is built on the domination of nature, using petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides to grow food while destroying long-term soil, water, and wider ecological health. In Brazil, since the colonial era, agricultural development has been directed at large plantations growing cash crops for export. This continues through today. Agroecology focuses on relationships between crops, humans, soil, insects, and wider ecosystems.
É possível alimentar o mundo com alimentos de alta qualidade, preservando o meio ambiente.
These cooperatives are demonstrating the possibility of an alternative model of flourishing rural life, which provides thriving livelihoods for small farmers, produces more food per acre than neighboring conventional farmers, all while rehabilitating the earth.